Good afternoon, cadre and cadets. My name is Cadet Casillas. I'm here with Cadet Ward and Cadet Patel, and today we are going over the United States Central Command. We are going to begin by an introduction with Cadet Ward, going over the brief history, the command structure, and area of operations. Then we'll dig deep into the four focus areas: partners, threats, challenges, and opportunities, both globally and domestically. Then we will end with Cadet Patel going over recent events, operations, and issues within Centcom.
Awesome, thank you for that introduction, Cadet Casillas. As mentioned, I'm Cadet Ward, and I'll be starting out with the history of Centcom and what that looks like today. So to begin, the inception of Centcom was January 1st, 1983. Centcom, as implied by the name, was established to cover the central area of the globe. Many across the United States with the establishment of Centcom believed it was due to growing Cold War tensions with the United States and Russia and China. But in reality, the United States government realized we needed a growing, more focused role in this region due to two primary reasons. One, the hostage crisis in Iran, and two, the impending potential invasion of Afghanistan by the Soviet government at the time. And with that said, the Centcom historically and even today is among one of the least secure and stable regions with various governments in the world. So to promote that national security today is super important. To briefly cover some of the significant battles/wars that we've seen since the inception of Centcom. First, we have Operation Desert Storm in 1991. This was for the primary purpose of liberating Kuwait. Iraqi Freedom from 2003 to 2011. This was primarily to overthrow the Saddam Hussein horrific regime that he had at the time, install a democratic government for the people, and to take away those potential weapons of mass destruction that the government had at that time. And then recently, most notable, most famous by many across the globe, particularly in the United States, the Afghanistan War, beginning in 2001. Troops were just officially withdrawn in 2021, making this a decade, 2 wars long. Again, extremely long, and due to that, it's very controversial among the people, amongst the military and the government, of how this ended, why it happened, because within months after the withdrawal of US troops, ultimately the Taliban government, which we had promoted to deflect against for so long, was able to control the government very quickly once again. As I'll be covering the notable leaders that are in charge of Centcom on the next slide, I wanted to cover some of the primary and primarily terrorist leaders we've seen throughout the history in various regions of Centcom. So first and most famous, Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden was killed during the Obama administration, primary perpetrator of 9/11, founder of Al-Qaeda, extremely large terrorist group that we have fought for so long. Saddam Hussein, as I just mentioned above, again, we wanted to overthrow his horrific regime that he had, take away his dictatorship government that he had. Again, was a huge promoter of mass weapons of destruction, responsible for dozens of terrorist attacks against United States soldiers and civilians, and again, civilians that are non-United States, but represented by NATO as well. And the last one, and the most recent one, Ayman al-Zawahiri, he was killed in July of 2022 by that drone strike that made national headlines. He was one of the last primary perpetrators of 9/11 at the time, and with his death, we see another one of the major founders, leaders of Al-Qaeda government gone. So the command structure of Centcom, the command structure follows a traditional organizational structure that we see in major command posts across the country, AFCOM, NORTHCOM, etc. With that said, Centcom is unique in the way that compared to many command posts that we have a wide representation from various branches. With that, the commander is represented by a U.S. Army general, the deputy commander is Lieutenant General from the Air Force, and then the senior enlisted leader is Wally Walters from the Navy. Again, vast representation from 3 different branches rather than being primarily focused on 1 or 2 branches. And within the organizational structure, we see a pretty similar standard that can be seen in many other huge staffs. So we have our special staff on the left side here. We have the directorates J1 through J8, which is made of high-ranking officials from various branches. And again, these are all on a rotational basis. No one is permanently assigned to be a position in any of these. So the area of responsibility for Centcom. So historically, Centcom used to also cover 8 additional countries in Africa, but with the foundation of AFRICOM, that is no longer necessary, so US Centcom now covers 21 countries. The only country we have left in Africa is Egypt. So from Northeast Africa through the Middle East and to the borders of South and West Asia, we see that huge Centcom presence, and although it's not geographically as large as many of the command posts we see throughout the globe, still extremely large. We have over 20 official speaking languages, hundreds of dialects within this area, 4 million square miles, and then also huge bodies of water represented here, the Mediterranean Sea, the Red Sea, the Caspian Sea, again, major bodies of water that are fundamental for trade along major borders, again, extremely important for this region. And the last thing I will be covering today is the Army units that we see that are aligned within or aligned to Centcom. So U.S. Army Central, or RCENT, is a primary Army Centcom component that we have. Again, no units within Centcom are assigned on a permanent basis, but some that we can see within RCENT are Task Force Spartan, 1st Theater Sustainment Command, 335th Signal Command, 4th ECD, Area Support Group of Kuwait and Jordan. So again, these rotational units that come in made of not only active duty, but also Reserve and National Guard officials as well. And now I'll be handing it off to Cadet Casillas.
Thank you, Cadet Ward. Now we're going to go over partners, threats, challenges, and opportunities that have been noted in the posture statement by General Kenneth McKenzie back in 2022. To begin, we're going to go over partners. Now, there are other allied forces within the region other than these 3, but these are strategic partners that are critical to the success of the United States. The first is Egypt, who's a strategic partner who provides access over flight and through the Suez Canal for transit for the U.S. forces. Israel actually moved from EUCOM to CENTCOM, and now the U.S. is committed to Israel's security and will support their military expansion through training, joint exercises, and defense cooperation efforts. And Jordan, who has always been a committed partner, who's a key partner in defeating ISIS. Next, we're going to move on to threats. Iran continues to pursue regional dominance. They threaten the area with their weapon systems that have been affecting global trade and the energy supply. They've developed ballistic missiles, forces, and have been developing aerial and maritime unmanned systems that threaten our partners throughout the region. Next are VEOs, which are violent extremist organizations. Think of Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and they reside in Yemen, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. And they are a threat to our partners as well as to the U.S. security. They grow because of civil war, poor governance, and the scarce resources and opportunities that reside in the region. Next, we have China, which the People's Republic of China import 36% of their natural gas from the region. We risk displacing the U.S. security assistance relationships with their foreign military sales and business they conduct within the region. And then Russia has been developing forces and footprints capable of sustaining the extraterritorial military operation that can disrupt NATO operations. The region depends on their wheat exports, and with the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, this leads to a health crisis with not being able and hunger. And then next, we have our challenges. Detainees in Syria are made up of ISIS detainees, and this has been reaching an expansion of the violent extremist organizations within the cells, and they're guarded by those who do not have enough experience to be able to guard these situations. Next, the internally displaced persons and refugees. We have limited humanitarian relief resources, and the challenge is managing the security for that. The VEOs use these camps to their advantage by recruiting and smuggling people out to work to become part of terrorist organizations. Although we are committed to the law of armed conflict, safeguarding civilian life is still one of the biggest challenges yet. The Secretary of Defense has said we are still trying to minimize and respond to civilian harm that has been done within our operations in the past and currently. This has been an opportunity to develop the civilian harm mitigation, which provides interagency coordination, improving tactic techniques, and providing more oversight of reporting and investigations. Last, our opportunities are to advise and assist local partners to increase regional stability, and this will improve and increase the free flow of navigation, resources, and commerce, as noted that geographically, we are surrounded by seas within this region. Next, I'm handing it off to Cadet Patel for recent events and operations within the region.
Thanks, Cadet Casillas. Again, my name is Cadet Patel, and I'll be going over the recent events and operation of Centcom's area of responsibility. So following 9/11, there was many notable operations and missions and events that Centcom has been a part of. Most notably was Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom at the dawn of the early 2000s. Operation Enduring Freedom was a military operation into Afghanistan, and obviously Operation Iraqi Freedom was against Saddam Hussein's regime in Iraq. We also have the International Security Assistance Force, or ISAF. Many of you have probably seen those patches that many Army members wear, and that was a support and obviously security assistance force where we were assisting the Afghan National Security Army from 2001 to 2014. The two that we're going to focus on and the most recent that Centcom's a part of is Operation Inherent Resolve, which takes place in Iraq and Syria and some of the surrounding regions, and then also a Resolute Support mission in Afghanistan that is now terminated. So let's go over Operation Inherent Resolve. So this is actually an ongoing operation, and many people don't know that, but it's a multinational operation led by the U.S. So U.S. intervention began in 2014, and it's still ongoing. So a lot of times you'll see that U.S. members and Spec Ops from the U.S. military often raid ISIS leaders in Syria and Iraq in the regions. You often see that in the news. It's a combined joint task force, meaning it's all branches of the military as well as other nations that are responsible for defeating ISIS. And one of the key mottos of this operation is enduring defeat. So we want the permanent defeat of ISIS. We don't want to just keep them away. We want to destroy them. And that's why it's taking all of the efforts from many nations and lots of special forces and those type of units, because it's pretty difficult to root out ISIS in all the different surrounding regions of Iraq and Syria. And we also want to bring about regional stability. So if you look at the picture, the logo of this operation, you can see two swords and then an olive branch, which obviously represents the dual nature of the operation. So we want to defeat ISIS and also bring about peace and stability in the region. And then here are some other recent events that you may have seen in the news. So we have, back in 2020, under the Trump administration, we had the assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, and that was under a drone strike. A lot of those details are still classified, but we know that that was within Centcom's area of responsibility, so Centcom was probably involved. ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was killed in a raid in northern Syria in 2019. That was a helicopter raid, so most likely special forces. And then his successor next year, in 2020, Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi was killed in a raid by U.S. forces. So a lot of these things are happening pretty recently, and people don't realize this, but it's still an ongoing operation. Senior ISIS leader Hamza al-Hamzi was killed in a raid in Syria last week. So literally February 17th, most recent raid, this operation hits pretty close to home, and 4 U.S. service members were wounded. So we still have troops that are being wounded and maybe even killed in this operation. And you may also see that there's recent interdictions of Iranian weapons going to Yemen, because there's a big conflict going on in Yemen. We often capture those weapons. You may see pictures of all these AKs and Iranian-made munitions on naval vessels that we capture. Here's some other interesting events and missions that Centcom has been a part of. So Resolute Support Mission was the mission that began in 2015 and it's ended in 2021. And that was to assist, train, and advise the Afghan security forces so they would hopefully be able to lead Afghanistan into a better future. Obviously, we all know how that ended. It terminated in 2021 because of the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. Humanitarian assistance to Turkey and Syria in the wake of recent earthquake disasters. So Centcom's not just military operations, it also does a lot of humanitarian work. So those earthquakes that killed thousands of people that happened a couple weeks ago, Centcom has been able to send lots of tents, and 300,000 pounds of aid was downloaded from aircraft and air bases in Turkey. So Centcom is doing a lot of amazing things in the world right now. I think people ought to look into more of what they're doing, even if the global war on terror is ended. Thank you.